Welcome to the Urbanist Agenda, the podcast with a love-hate relationship with YouTube. I'm Jason from Not Just Bikes, and I'm joined once again with Reese from RMTransit. Welcome back, Reese.
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
Yeah, indeed. It's always good to talk to you. So I wanted to have this conversation because a few weeks ago, you put out a video on RMTransit that basically says you're done, like you're done with YouTube. So for anybody that hasn't seen it, give a quick summary about what that means.
Yeah, so I did YouTube full-time for like 5 years. I made hundreds of videos.
Yeah.
I covered like tons of different cities. And I mean, of course, as with anything, there's many reasons that I've made this decision. One reason is just because I've kind of done the YouTube thing. Like, this isn't to say that there's a certain amount of videos or something people should make or whatever, but like, you know, everyone has their breaking point. And so did a lot of YouTube. I did not. My wife and I had a kid last year, and so that takes up a ton of my time, and it's sort of like hard to fit in YouTube because YouTube is all encompassing. It takes up so much of your time, and so it's hard to be a good parent and also run a YouTube channel, especially to like a small kid who it's like you need to hold them 50% of the time in your arms because they will scream otherwise. So there's that element. And I mean, like, you also, I think, you know, because I think you have kids and they're a lot older. So it's easier. It's more...
It is way different when the kids are older. And actually, then it's kind of cool that their dad's a YouTuber to all their friends.
Exactly.
And it's a bit cringe for them.
My kid doesn't even know what YouTube is. I mean, he doesn't even know he couldn't say YouTube if he wanted to. So
kids these days, man, don't even know what YouTube is.
Right. But so given the circumstance, there's that. And then there is this kind of long-term building frustration where it's like, the reality is, as much as I would like to live in, say, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Japan, I do not. And it's a certain thing where it's like when you talk about, it would be like if you're a tech guy, you're like really into tech and startups, and you live in like, I don't know, in Europe somewhere, and you should be in Silicon Valley, but life circumstances mean that you're in Warsaw or something. And it just makes you a little upset every time you talk about it because you're like, I just want to be in San Jose and meeting startup people. And it's the same thing with transit. It's like, I'm not in the worst place in the world. Similarly, I don't think Warsaw is probably the worst place in the world to have a tech startup, but you're just like constantly looking at this thing that you can't have or that you can have, but it's in vacations. And then it's like, it's explicit that when you leave the place, you are returning to a place with bad public transport. And it's just kind of depressing. And so over time, especially as I don't think Toronto, which is where I've spent most of my time, not the only place, I don't think Toronto is bad. And I think we've talked about this in previous podcast episodes.
Yeah.
The most frustrating part is that it is so good and that it could be really good.
Yeah.
But it's just, they always have to screw something up. And I think the politicians, you know, they're not thoughtful enough. They're not, you know, Not Just Bikes has been out for years.
Yeah, 5-6 years now.
The fact that a lot of basic stuff, you know, like the Amsterdam trams are great. The Toronto streetcars, if Toronto politicians were like, yeah, they should be good like that. If they wanted to, they could have done it in 5 years, and they haven't. They're not even trying. And to be honest, the mayor right now, even though she's kind of like a progressive city mayor, she's doing nothing amazing on transit. The streetcars still kind of suck. The subway has all these slow zones. It's just the combination of the transit around you not working and just constantly talking about, but in other places, the transit is pretty great. It's just so grating. And at some point, you kind of just go, okay, I need to resign in protest of this because and I tried to make it pretty explicit to people that like part of the reason I'm doing this is because I'm so frustrated with how dysfunctional things are in Canada because we should be able to do better. And the fact that we're not is a choice, and it's really disappointing. And so I hope that, you know, if an influential person who's talked a lot about all these issues says that like there needs to be some systemic change in the way things are organized and managed and the sort of vision for what we're going to create in the future, that people will go, oh, shit, we really do need to change things a bit more dramatically. And like, just spending 10% more isn't going to solve the problems in the same way that it wouldn't with cycling, right? You know, installing a few more bike lanes isn't going to turn Canada into the Netherlands. You know, it's like a systemic change, but it's a doable thing, but you have to want it. And I'm frustrated that the politicians here don't want it. And a lot of people who are even interested in the topic, they don't do a good job having the conversation. You'd be talking about something and they'd say, oh, we just need to spend more money. And it's like, no, it's actually, the problems are a lot more deep than that. And when you say things like that, you kind of dumb them down and make the problem seem simpler than they are. And we just need a lot of things, and it's frustrating that we don't have them. So that was a very long way of saying, I'm quitting. I've quit.
Or get out of here.
I've retired. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the situation.
I mean, it's completely understandable. You and I have talked before on the podcast, but also in person about Toronto and how the most frustrating part is that it has so much potential.
For sure.
I think that's the thing. We can see it because we've been to all these other places. We've read about these other places. We've experienced all these other places. And we see that Toronto has all the right bones to make the same thing happen, and maybe even better. Like, you see some of these places and you're like, you know what, Toronto really could do this, but they just don't. And I think if Toronto were just shit, like it were just a terrible city, I think it would be easier.
Of course.
Because we would just say, it's garbage, whatever. Like, this is nowhere near. But it's so close. It's like you could see it. You could almost grasp it, and they just don't.
And I mean, it's that, right? It's the fact that there is some sort of hope and you're just constantly being let down. Whereas if it was a city that, if it was Houston, you wouldn't expect anything different. And you know what? In some ways, it would actually, you'd be able to have a healthier, happier relationship because you'd be like, Houston has some redeeming features. The urbanism is not one of them. Whereas in Toronto, it's like the urbanism has some positive elements. And so you're just disappointed when they don't kind of, it's a swing and a miss with so many things. And so, yeah, Toronto makes it really difficult. And I think what makes it difficult is that even some other Canadian cities do various things better. So it's like if it had cycling that was as good as Montreal, it would be a lot better. If it had transit that was good as Vancouver, it'd be a lot better. And it's just like Toronto is so stuck far up its own behind that it just can't look to other places. And it almost looks to places in America more than it looks to places in Canada or in Europe or Asia. And you visit the city and you're like, guys, what are you doing? Like, no, you don't need to emulate Philly or you don't need to emulate Cleveland. These are not the, look over there and over there. And yeah, I think it's a really weird dynamic. Like, Toronto is great, but it's the most American city in Canada in a lot of ways. You know, it's got the NBA franchise. It's got the Cheesecake Factory. A lot of people, it seems like they just want to be in America. And it's problematic for creating positive change.
Well, I mean, the most American city in Canada is probably Calgary, but Toronto's maybe a close second. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really it. And I don't know how much it's worth going into that topic anymore. Again, like we've talked about this so many times before. And
go listen to the previous podcast episodes.
Yes, any of them with RMTransit, and we guaranteed we complain about Toronto in there. Yes, that is our shared pain, our shared trauma. But yeah, so I mean, it's true. You made so many videos. You talked about so many different things. Like when I look at the number of cities that you covered, and it's actually phenomenal. I mean, I have this strict rule for myself that to cover a city, I have to go there myself and film it in person. It's a very different thing. But you were doing research on places that you didn't necessarily go to, but your research was very deep too, right? Like it was very solid research.
And I would say I visited the majority of the cities I covered. There's some places where, you know, I didn't actually cover Pyongyang, but I wouldn't have gone to Pyongyang. So there's like some places that are not practical. But I think you go to a lot of places and you see patterns, you know.
Definitely.
So,
and you've traveled enough to understand those dynamics of what it's actually like to be there. I do find like it's impossible to talk to, say, Americans about public transit if they've never left the United States. It doesn't compute. Like,
for sure. You have to experience it. You really have to go and use it and live with it, frankly. Like you can't just use it for a day. You have to use it for an extended period of time.
Yep.
And also, honestly, you have to use it at home too, because even though it's frequently disappointing, the main way I've gotten around cities in Canada that I've lived in for my entire life has been public transportation, with car being the exception sometimes. And when you do that, you really see, you're like, oh, wow. Like the little details are so much better. You know, the seats are more comfortable. The signs are better designed.
Yeah.
It's more attractive. It's cleaner. You notice those elements, right? And I think so it's very important to have the experience, not only, you know, looking at the stats, which are helpful, but the qualitative stuff, because like the New York City subway looks very impressive on a map and in terms of stats. And then you go on it and you're like, this is like a public toilet in a country that's bad at public toilets. It's filthy, right? And there's rats and there's memes about rats. It's
like, for example, I was just in Seoul. I know you've been there in South Korea before. And I was riding the metro there. And in the stats, there are fewer metro stations in Seoul than there are in New York City. So like Seoul is behind New York City. But when you go there, Seoul is ahead of New York City in literally every metric that matters.
Yeah. Every single one. It's cleaner, it's more modern, it's futuristic in ways. You know, the
platform
stations
screen doors everywhere. The signage is brilliant. Like,
and it's not even, English is not the language that's generally spoken in Korea. That's the thing I always find so funny in Asia, is that they manage to pack like 5 languages in like every city. Yeah. And you just go to a place like Toronto, right? Why does Toronto have one language? Like, at least for me, like very important announcements, surely you could do like 3 or 4 different languages.
Especially in Toronto, yeah. There are so many people from so many different countries in Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Seoul, every single announcement is in Korean, English, Japanese, and Mandarin Chinese.
Yeah.
Every sign almost is in those 4 languages. Yeah, it's remarkable. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, and the trains are frequent. There's incredible internet connectivity within the system. Yeah. The seats are actually heated. That's a pretty cool feature. I mean, it's just good. It's just excellent. And do they have the advantage of the system being much newer? Yes. But then London is a lot nicer than New York's system, and London's is older than New York's system, right? So I think that these like details matter a lot. And that was always why I was interested in covering them, because I think people who travel a lot kind of get a lot of this stuff, but it's very hard to envision, if you don't, that there's all these different dimensions that a city or a transit system can be good in. And you don't understand the value of those extra dimensions until you experience it. And then it's taken away from you. And you're like, wow, okay, I kind of missed that.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing goes with cycling and many other things as well. Like, I noticed one of the things that really stood out when I watched your videos compared to many other transit videos is that one of the things you very often talk about is signage and wayfinding. And I find like a lot of transit people in North America totally miss that's like super important, that, you know, when you get off the train, you want to immediately be facing a sign that tells you where you are, what direction to go. When you're on a transit vehicle, a bus even, you have like an LCD screen that shows you the next few stops, not just calling out the next one, but all of them. And they have information about like what other bus lines, what other services you can transfer to. And it makes such a difference to have good wayfinding and signage.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where if you travel, you'll start to expect that stuff because it is so standard in most of the world. Yeah. And I mean, different places have their faults and things that they don't do as well. But you really recognize, like, when you're in a place with crap wayfinding, that it's just harder to get around. And, you know, even in, I mean, I guess this isn't true too much in Toronto, but even here, when I bring someone new onto the system, and it can be confusing for them, and it's just, this shouldn't be that way. Road signs are not confusing to most people. They're pretty self-explanatory. And it's like, I wish all transportation modes had the same level of attention so that people could easily get around by other means. Because I think that we talk about the kind of explicit ways that you encourage cycling and stuff by having slow streets and cycle tracks and all of that. But then there are those kind of quiet, systematic things that push people in one direction or another. If every time I get on a bike, the signs are crap and it's hard to understand how to get around, but if I get in a car, it's very clear and easy to navigate and, you know, draw out a route, it implicitly pushes me towards one or the other. And it might not even be intentional, but that stuff matters a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is very difficult to get that across to people who haven't experienced it, right? I mean, and that's what we try to do in our videos, right? We try to get that kind of thing across, but it's difficult.
And I think that is the thing that I think is most powerful about not just bikes specifically, is it's a very experiential thing. Like, I think the first video of yours I ever watched was literally just about, it may have been the taking the trash out one, but I just remember being in Amsterdam and seeing the underground trash container and thinking, like, people don't understand what that is. And it's very, if you try to explain it to them, they're underground, what is this? But they also don't understand the implication of how that makes our cities better. And so I think YouTube ends up being this incredible format for that, because what it does is it lets you tell someone something while you're showing them. And that combination lets you really make a strong point about things that are hard to communicate otherwise. I think it's very hard to communicate something like trash in an exciting way if it's not on video.
Traffic lights or, any of those things.
But if you show people a video of it, it's like, oh my God, that actually suddenly makes so much sense. And I think that the fact that because there's been urbanism content for a long time since as long as there's been cities. But I think that video has really brought a lot of people into the fold. And I think it's because it makes it so clear and so obvious. Like, wow, why don't we just do it that way?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the trick, right? But it takes a lot of effort to get that across, right? Like, you're not just summarizing Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot of work to put together the videos that we do. And you did. I can't believe how often you put out videos, because the amount of research that you put into them was non-trivial. It wasn't just the stuff you found, with your quick Google search. It was more than that. And that was impressive.
Well, I appreciate it.
I could never get to that kind of throughput.
I mean, one thing builds on another. You will notice when you read about this stuff that people do sometimes bring up different places. And I think the key thing is sometimes people, when they hear about another place, this, me included probably a long time ago, you just dismiss it and go, okay, I don't care about what Amsterdam does. I'm reading about Chicago.
Right.
And it's really important to actually read and say, hey, like Amsterdam does this. And then you create this mental map where all of these, every time Amsterdam comes up, it's creating a little note, a little asterisk on there that, hey, and it really adds color to this whole thing, because you start to see the connections in these cities do this thing similar, and these cities, they have this kind of thing in common. And I think that's where you start to understand not only like what we need to do, but the path we can take to get to a different place, to get to make our cities better. And so I think that's pretty key to all of this, to the whole improving our cities thing that it seems like we all want to do.
I mean, that is the ultimate goal, but man, some cities make it much harder than others. Holy shit.
They do. And it's the way you live your life. So when it doesn't work well, it's incredibly exhausting. And the processes and the people that get in the way are often incredibly difficult to deal with.
Yeah. And I find the whole dynamic gets so much different when you have kids too.
For sure.
At every level of kids. Like, you can take your transit system and be generally okay with it. You take it yourself, but then try doing it with a baby stroller. Yeah. Try doing it with an impatient toddler. Like at every level. Try doing it when, your teenager has to do it by themselves instead of with you, as our teenager does. At every level, it's so different with kids. And I think that's also something that a lot of people don't appreciate.
Yeah, and I think a lot about the whole, the world, people aren't having as many kids, etc. And I think that a lot of that stuff is downstream of the fact that people, when they design anything, they design it for an adult, and they don't think about, not only a kid, but an adult with a kid. How can we make this more seamless? And I think one thing I posted on Blue Sky and Mastodon recently, but this is a really good example of this. And this is something that it's one of those things that's in a dimension that no one thinks about until they experience. But in Japan, in a lot of bathrooms, they have a seat. So if you have an infant, you can put the infant in the seat and wash your hands without having an infant in your hands.
Yeah, they have a little seat with a little seat belt on it that
exactly.
You can just strap them in.
And when you've experienced that, it makes because I think the default in North America and even in other parts of the world sometimes is you got to kind of have your kid in a car and you've got to drive them here and there. And when you have a problem, you're going to drive home. And having stuff like that makes it so that you can live your life in the city with a kid, it's so amazing. And I think Japan does stuff like that incredibly well. And so I think the ideal world is one where every city can say, hey, that city does this well. Let's adopt it and do it in our city as well, so that everyone kind of benefits.
And don't even get me started on the excuses that people give when you try to give an example from another city that's not literally identical.
For sure.
If you're talking to someone in Toronto and you're not talking about Chicago, which is basically the same at many metrics, then it's basically irrelevant. There's always the excuse. And I find as soon as you mention any other city, the person instinctively jumps to whatever the first difference comes to in their mind, whether it's the weather, it's the size, population, culture, whatever pops into their mind first, that's the excuse. And then they just jump on it.
I mean, I think this is the problem with cities, is that there's so many differences that you can find that if you're coming from a place where you just want to have a reason not to do something, there will never be a shortage of things to bring up. And so what's really important, I think, in leaders, et cetera, is to have people who are actually motivated on delivering a result. hey, we are going to reduce cyclist fatalities. We're going to encourage people to have kids by making the city friendlier to them, and not do it through this, like, we're going to do reports, we're going to do this, but actually delivering some result. And
Yeah.
that forces you to actually reckon with the differences, find solutions. There's usually some solution to these kind of localization problems, and it's usually not a big one, and then just solve the problem. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, between our two channels, we've covered tons of different places. Everywhere has something different that makes it unique, and that means you have to do things slightly differently. But there's always an answer if you actually want to find the answer. The issue is that I think a lot of people don't want to find the answer.
Yeah, I find that so often. And I think that's one of the very frustrating things about being a YouTuber content creator in this space, is that there's so many people that just want to find the conversation ending point to make this go away. Like, they just want to keep the status quo. They don't want anything to change. They want to keep on the track that they're on, whatever that is. And they just want to find a reason to make you go away.
Yeah. No, it's deeply frustrating. And I think it is, especially when you look at something like technology, which is another passion of mine. It's amazing how different the dynamic is. Like, I kind of wish we had a lot of the dynamics we have in technology in cities, because with technology, obviously this is not a universal statement. There are always exceptions. But when you go and you take a bunch of regular people and you show them the new iPhone, usually they're going to have a few comments about, of course, there's a new iPhone. Did they replace the port or this or that? But they're going to understand, like, oh, this feature is better, this feature is better. I'm going to get the new iPhone. Whereas with a city, you show people a new city and you go, this feature is better, this feature is better. They'll probably agree. I mean, if you show someone a street in Amsterdam, they're not going to tell you it's ugly, because it's not. But then when you get down to, like, okay, so are we going to adopt this? Unlike with, say, the iPhone, where people are just like, yeah, let me spend $1,000 on a new glass rectangle, they just lose their minds and try to put up every barrier possible. I don't truly understand why. I think people maybe think that, the iPhone is always good, but cities could become bad. If we install a bike lane, we could become Houston. I don't know. I don't know what the nightmare city looks like to regular people, but I think this is a really weird dynamic where people in general, are so small c conservative about cities, where they're not about so many other topics.
Yeah, I do find that it's very, very strange to me, because there will always be people who will want the status quo. There's a segment of the population that always wants that. There's a segment of the population that's conservative about any kind of change and extremely loss adverse. That's whatever. Like, that happens with everything. But with cities, I think you're right. Like, a much larger percent of the population is very loss adverse and very small c conservative about any kind of change. Like, they're just petrified that they're going to be stuck in bumper to bumper traffic for the rest of their lives. I don't know what it is that does that. I don't know if it's the motonormativity kind of thing, the trauma that cars bring and thinking that it could be worse. Like, when people don't want new developments near them because they're afraid of the traffic that will cause. And traffic is already a major pain point to them, and they just cannot deal with that, even a chance that might get worse. I don't know what it is, but I think you're right.
It's strange. Yeah, I mean, it's shadows, it's traffic, there's not enough parking. And there are many situations where, some city wants to do a bus lane or something. It could be any city. And immediately you have the complaints about parking, et cetera, even though it's not very bad. And it is so strange, right? Because people in their lives experience all kinds of changes on a regular basis.
Yeah, especially with how fast technology is changing in our lifetimes. It's bonkers.
And yet they don't react in this kind of, oh my God, the sky is falling because there's some red paint on the street now. And yet with cities, it's just, I do think when you talk about, like, why does this happen? I think it's a cultural thing to an extent. Like, we really elevate people who scream about these things and who talk about, and a lot of them, shamefully, I think this point gets discussed now, and I think it's healthy. They shamefully kind of say, well, bike lanes are just like highways in the 1960s, right? Like, it's an attack on the city. And they use the kind of language of people whose houses were legitimately just demolished, and neighborhoods that were demolished. And obviously this actually happened with transit in some places, like in Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, in Amsterdam, the Newmarket riots was because of transit.
They've kind of captured that, and they use it for kind of trying to maintain the status quo. And I think that as a kind of basically in Western society, we've tilted the pendulum too far in the direction of like people can just shut anything down now. And it limits our ability to do positive things and to make our cities better. And the thing that's frustrating is that the progress has never really stopped, but it's just slowed to a point where it becomes so much less helpful.
Yeah.
I think about bike lanes in a lot of North American cities have bike lanes. And I think it's pretty clear that there will be more bike lanes over time. But so many people's lives are so much worse than they need to be and will be because the bike lane networks they might be Amsterdam level in 100 years. And so it's like they will live their entire lives without the good thing.
Yeah.
When the good thing could be delivered, Amsterdam created the playbook, right? A city that really wants to do it, I'm sure it could create an Amsterdam-like cycling environment in like 5 years if they really wanted it.
Yeah. And you know what? It would cost nothing.
It's cheap.
This is the other thing that drives me nuts is the bike shedding around bikes.
Mm-hmm.
Like when bike projects are discussed, well, there's so many things that annoy me. Like the fact that if there's a safety issue with a road, they'll just go and install a guardrail and that's it. Like nobody has to have like 16 public consultations for it. But when it's a protected bike lane, we do. And we involve all of these people who know nothing about it when we don't do that for other types of infrastructure, especially if they have to do with car safety. But I find like people who get in there and they're like, this bike lane, the project's going to cost $150,000. And I'm like, do you have any idea? Like they did an off-ramp project that cost like 116 million. What are we talking about? What is this? And it's so incredibly frustrating.
It is the normativity.
Like they could take a tiny slice of the car budget, like literally 5%, and just any city could just build out perfect bike lanes. This stuff's cheap, easy.
That definitely makes it more frustrating. And I mean, I think it all comes down to what is a priority, right? Like if you actually look, and I think that this is overplayed slightly, like it's not the case that if the US just decided it liked trains instead of highways, that it would be able to build trains everywhere. But when you look at the way they build highways or roads in the US, they do a lot of the things that they do for transit or cycling infrastructure in other places in terms of kind of like an expedited process. The way the projects are structured is much more rational and it lets them deliver things successfully. It's just the wrong thing that they're delivering. But when you look at transit and cycling infrastructure, et cetera, it's interesting because it so often gets captured by NIMBYs or by interests that are trying to like find a way like, okay, we have money for a bike lane and we divert it to all of these non-bike lane things like, hey, let's make the parking lot nicer. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I think the reason that can happen is because, in some cultures, if it's seen as not a priority, like bike lanes and transit often are in North America, then it's like kind of left open by politicians for people who have these different desires to capture that money and actually send it to car stuff often.
Yeah, the number of times I've seen bike lane projects with these inflated budgets and they end up going to, nicer parking, maybe some trees and greenery. That's nice, but like, why is it coming into the bike budget?
Exactly.
It goes into like, well, since we need to do this and we can't take any space away from cars, everything needs to be wider, which means we also need to move all of the gutters and all of the flood infrastructure and the sewers and stuff. And I'm like, and that all comes out of the active transportation budget. I'm like, come on.
These things would never happen for roads, but it happens for public transport and cycling because it's seen as a kind of thing that, let's be honest, a lot of the times like the road engineers are being forced to do. And so they kind of come up with various schemes that let them divert money from something that frankly, that needs the money to something that doesn't need the money.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, we could complain about public transit forever. I would be interested to get back to the topic of YouTube a little bit here.
That's fair.
But, let's have another episode where all we do is complain about public transit in North America. So with respect to YouTube, like you were a YouTuber for a while. What were the things that you liked and didn't like so much about being a YouTuber? Because I know like when I first started this, I had no idea what this was like, like the back end of what this is all like and the way that you interface with other people, the public, social media. I had no concept of this.
So, wow, it's a great question. I think it's an under-discussed topic. I think YouTube is an amazing job because it is probably the most freeing job you could possibly have, because you can basically do it from anywhere, right? As long as you have an internet connection.
And any time, too. And that's what I find is that I work around my kid's schedule.
Which is a plus or a minus, right?
Yeah, it is a plus or minus, because I also find that like weekends blur into weekdays when it comes to this job.
It's an incredibly freeform job. And so that means total freedom. And this is the thing I think about YouTube, is that most of the good things are just also the bad things. It's just in a different way, right? So the freeform element of it makes it super flexible. You can work where you want, when you want, as you said. The bad part of that is that you're expected to work everywhere and at all times if you want to have a kind of successful channel, because you're incentivized to upload fairly regularly on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And you are incentivized to do various things. And people talk about the algorithm and how it's like the algorithm. I'm of two minds of this. On one hand, I agree that like the algorithm is, and the algorithm is half of YouTuber conversations. On one hand, I agree that it's just giving content to the viewers that they like. But at the same time, it is also true that often people enjoy things which are not good for them. And, there are things that are good that people don't necessarily always want to see. And so I think that there is still an extent to which, the algorithm is going to feed people kind of popcorn content, as opposed to stuff that challenges them, that maybe gives them a different perspective. Because sometimes when people hear things they don't like, they might close the app. And and so I think that that's a real challenge, that you have to try to create content that that you want to keep people watching, but you also want to challenge them if you're doing, I think, a good job of what you're doing. And so you have to think about those dynamics. And so I think that that's an interesting and potentially positive element of it. It's a global community, which I think is very cool. I think of other YouTubers as my coworkers. I mean, particularly transit urbanist type people.
Yeah,
and I think that is a really cool dynamic.
Yeah, that is one thing that people don't appreciate. Like, all YouTubers talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like, we all get on group chats and Slack and Discord and everything else.
Well, this is one thing I was going to say, and I guess it's hard to only talk about the positives without the negatives. It is crazy that YouTube has zero mechanism really to make it so that YouTubers can easily communicate with each other.
That is weird, right?
They had a messaging at one point.
They have messaging in YouTube, but this is the thing with all of these YouTube things. Like, you have a feature like that. They used to have messaging, but then it became super toxic. They used to have this thing where you could have a video and you could reference that video as your video, and it would say, like, this is in reference to this video. Responses, reactions, whatever. But then it was just used by people clout farming, right?
Yeah.
Who were just stuffing it into the latest trending videos. So every one of these things, every time you think, oh, YouTube should do X, it's like there's a good side and a really bad side. It's both. You got to balance. That's the trick with all of it.
So that element's really interesting. I mean, the comments are another example.
Oh, don't. Yeah.
I have amazing comments, but then I have, and I have to say, like, there have been some people where, and this is where it gets frustrating, is like, someone leaves a really nice comment. How are you meant to actually like get in contact with someone if they're like, I'm a researcher from this city? And it's like, you can't get their email easily. You've got to do this whole back and forth. And so I think that it's funny because YouTube is a social media platform, but you often have to decamp to like Reddit or Discord to do social media stuff because it's not built into YouTube.
Yeah.
But the comments can be great. They can be terrible. I feel like a quarter of YouTuber conversations are probably about comments and about like, hey, do you ban this word? Do you ban that word? Do you should I just kick this person out of the comments? Should I read the comments? Should I reply to the comments? Like, that's a whole conversation people have. It's fun though, because it is really like, when you talk to other YouTubers, even if they're in like a totally different niche, everyone has these same discussions about, oh yeah, you had that thing, I had this thing, we both dealt with. And it's kind of nice. It is like your coworkers, like you're dealing with the same stuff that you would deal with at a company.
Yeah. But some people are much worse than others, especially if you're female or trans. Holy shit. The amount of shit those people get. Oh, wow. Yeah,
it's an advantage we don't have to deal with.
Yeah, it's wild, actually. But yes, everybody deals. Comments are one of those things that I probably shouldn't get into. Although, I would love to have a podcast episode where I just talk to a YouTuber about comments and just go off on comments. Because I could talk forever about comments. The thing I find with comments is that when the channel was small, comments were amazing. I was putting out videos for the first time. I was still learning. My videos were short. People were adding extra information. And it's great. But when you're small, you have this small community of people who are actively seeking out that kind of content. I will tell you that when your channel grows in popularity, the benefits of the comments go down.
Dramatic.
And when your channel gets to a certain level, which I have surpassed, especially if it hits the algorithm, the value of comments goes negative, very negative, extremely negative. And so that's one of those things with comments is that there is this great side of comments, but then as the channel gets bigger, comments, it's not just that they're less positive, it's that they're actively negative.
Yeah, and it's a weird dynamic.
It is. And finding like there are still the good comments. They are still there. I've seen them sometimes. Like they shine like a needle in a haystack. But like the signal to noise ratio, and I don't just mean like there's lots of garbage, obviously, and lots of people who are just like purposefully being argumentative,
Obtuse,
or, aggressive.
Yeah.
There are bots. There are all this like pure garbage, but there's also just noise. Like the wake up babe NJB just posted shit. Like there's just garbage, like so much pure garbage. Even just this is your best video yet, which I cannot tell you how many times I've said, I think this is your best video yet. And the very next comment is, I usually like your videos, but this one is...
The amount of times you'll have people who are screaming at you in the comments with opposing viewpoints. You did too much of this. I wish you did more of this. And it's just, you're like, wow, I can't. I think people should be nicer to YouTubers.
Well, they should be nicer to everybody online for sure.
I agree. It's a very personal thing. Like when you go and make a video, and I think that's, if we're talking about benefits, I think a huge thing is you do gain a lot of self-confidence because you're literally putting yourself out there to the world, speaking, sometimes showing your face, and that you open yourself up to a lot of criticism. And I think it helps you grow a lot. Like for me personally, I could not public speak before YouTube. Like I just could not go in front of a group of more than like 5 people and talk to them. And now I've done lots of, and you've done lots as well, like talking in front of large groups of people. And once you've done a lot of YouTube, I don't know, maybe this is universal, maybe it isn't. I find I'm much more comfortable in those situations. And I think that is a kind of underappreciated benefit. And it would be true probably of lots of other types of content creation, but YouTube is just, a very notable one.
Yeah. I will say that I feel like when it comes to talking about cities and stuff, I always had my experiences. And that's, again, like you mentioned earlier, that's what I try to really focus on and not just bikes. It's really all about the experiences because the data is irrelevant if when you get there, it sucks. But one of the things I feel very confident in now is that I feel very confident in my positions because I've seen every single possible objection to them.
Yes.
Thousands.
That is the thing. It's a gauntlet. Like you're putting your ideas out
that's
there.
right. It's a gauntlet. You've gone through it. Because like you said, you're putting a lot of effort into these things. And I think when it comes to high quality videos like yours and mine and the other people on Nebula and many other educational creators we know, you put effort into it, right? You're not just throwing content out there. You're not just churning out the content wheel. You're actually putting effort into it.
As much as this might be a problem increasingly.
Well, tell me about it. The AI
Another
stuff
podcast episode
may make me stop doing YouTube at some point. Yeah, that's a separate episode. Like if I stop doing YouTube, I guarantee it'll be because of AI slop. That will be the reason I stop. But like the number of fucking comments I get now on every video being like, I love this, but why do you have to use an AI voiceover? Or, this is great. Why can't you just film your own content instead of these AI street scenes? I'm like, what are you talking about? There is no AI in any of this. But anyway, oh my God, where was I?
No, but which is YouTube. I mean, I think these are the machinations you deal with YouTube, right? Because it's not like a regular job where you just get a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yep.
Your job performance is measured in real time down to the second, because if your videos do well, you get paid more. If they do poorly, you get paid less. You grow if you produce videos that the algorithm promotes and that people like, because people also share them.
And your analytics are in your face every single time you log into YouTube Studio.
Yeah, it's like, imagine if you went into your job and every time you went in, it's like the first thing you see is this sign that says, Jason did a bad job yesterday.
Yes, it's literally that. Or even just for the last couple hours, you've been shit.
Like, it's like, I was asleep.
I know, right?
It's like, that's a real challenge.
Like when you go in and it has your video ranked out of 10, right?
Yeah.
Like 1 being the best, that it's the best for that. Actually, I do like how YouTube does this. I wish more platforms did it, even though I hate seeing it first thing when I log in, that it'll show you when your video is 7 days old. It'll show you compared to the last 9 videos. When they were 7 days old.
Yeah.
Like, because other platforms will show you your analytics, but then like something's been out for 30 days versus 7 days. How do I even compare those things?
That is a huge problem.
Whereas they do show like at this point in time, here's how it was doing. But of course, you see that every time you log in. Oh, it's a 4 out of 10. Man, I don't know. I worked so hard on that. Or it's an 8 out of 10. What am I going to do? You know,
That's the
like,
greatest. I mean, I think this is probably many YouTubers' greatest frustration is that when they, and it's sort of like the experience of you go into school and you write an essay and you have the essay that you barely put any effort into and it gets a great grade. And then you have the one that you really sweat over and it
yeah.
gets a bad grade. And you have the same experience with YouTube where you have videos that you kind of like, okay, I threw this one together. It's not as polished and they do amazing. And then ones where you like really spent a ton of time, you went into great detail. You might have literally spent a lot of money. YouTubers have to, especially if you're traveling, but you have this experience where the inputs do not always equal the outputs. And I think that's challenging. I don't know if you have this experience, but I think you probably do. One thing I noticed when I was making videos regularly is that every time I was out and about, I was just constantly like, oh, that would make good video.
Yeah.
This would make good video.
My
and it was
kids
just
hate
like,
that.
you can't turn it off, right?
Yeah. Or where I bought myself, I used an old smartphone for years and years and years. I bought myself a smartphone with a really good camera finally because I would find I was out somewhere and I was like, oh, I got to film this. I got to, you know, and that does drive my kids nuts, especially when we're traveling. And like, normally what I do is if we do a holiday, we do the holiday and then the kids and my wife go home and I stay for another 2 or 3 days after just to film. But it's never that simple. Like you said, you're constantly living in it. So when I'm out with them and we're just waiting for the train, I was like, oh my God, I got to film this. I've been meaning to get this on camera. And they're like, oh my God, I thought you were going to film when we're done, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're always living it. It's always in your mind. Like the number of times I'm cycling along and I'll get like 3 video ideas in my head.
Yeah. And that's how you get them. I mean, like people always ask me, like, how do you make so many videos? And it's just like, well, I have a lot of ideas. Like they always come to me. And I feel like one of the good things about YouTube is that there's no limit on uploads. There's no limit on, you know, your creativity is actually pretty open-ended. And so you can kind of just make another video, talk about a topic. And it's very, I think that element of it's very nice. It's not a book where there's a word count limit or something. You can really kind of express what you want. And I think you can notice the trend. If you look at your videos, if you look at my videos, they get longer over time. Like over the YouTube career, they expand because you realize there's more and more stuff you want to say over time. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think it's a positive for sure.
Yeah. I mean, my wife points this out to me all the time. Like, I spend way too much time script writing. I can't speed up this process. Like, sometimes it takes me weeks to write a script. I will write it. It gets really big. I cut it in half. I write it. I cut it in half again. I cut it in half again. Like, I can't do it any other way. I love the end result, but the process is so painful. And she loves to remind me, you used to release 3-minute videos. You used to release 5-minute videos.
And you just can't.
And I think there's 2 parts of that. One of them is, like you said, that there's so many other things you want to say. But I think the other thing is that as your channel becomes bigger and you become like a known personality in this space, you are definitely a known personality in transit. And I know that I see this happen with myself too, but I'll be on Reddit or something, and there'll be somebody complaining about me. There'll be somebody complaining about you, or positive too.
But it's usually negative, if we're honest. People don't ad hominem in a positive way. And this is something that, like, I say this because people listening to it, maybe they'll, like, think about it and go back and do things differently or talk to their friends. But, like, YouTube creators, you know, like, it is nice to have positive feedback in the form of views and likes and some nice comments. But I think it's very rare that someone writes something in depth where they really, you know, say this person, and it's thoughtful. It's kind of point by point, like the things that they did that were good and the way that they presented it was good. But people will do that when they have negative feedback about you, even when it's like not coming from a good place. Like, you know, this person, they're clearly wealthy, or they're taking advantage of people, or they're doing this or that, and all kind of slanderous things. They'll post it on Reddit, etc. And it's terrible to, you know, see stuff about you written on the internet. And then it's like, do you respond? Do you not respond? You feel most people want to defend themselves when people are saying terrible things about them.
If there's one thing I've learned, it's never respond. Like, you just can't. You can't.
You will never win that engagement.
You will never. There is no winning at all. I did want to finish that one thought related to this, that I was saying the reason videos get longer as well is that people will pick them apart. And this is one of the things I hate about the script, is that I'll write something perfectly normal, and then I'll be like, my mind starts churning through all of the
gotchas, basically.
All of the objections, but like bad faith objections that you know are going to happen. And in ours, it'll be everything from like the car-hating suburbanite this is one of these things I think people don't understand as well. Like, I have detractors, but I also have anti-fans. Like, we have anti-fans.
Yeah.
There's a detractor is somebody that doesn't like our stuff. They don't like transit. They don't like bikes, whatever. I don't care. The anti-fans are the worst. They're people who actively hate watch your content, and you know they're going to be there. So there's all these different people who love transit, but just hate it when you mention this thing. Like people who hate trams, people who hate buses, but they love transit.
But you're rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, I know, right? But you know, when you're writing this script, you're like, oh God, I'm going to have to mention this. I'm going to have to mention this. I'm going to have to mention this. And it's this constant fight to not be like constantly hedging every single thing you talk about.
And qualifying every single thing, yeah.
Yes. And sometimes I will read through a script because the way I do it is I have to keep reading it out loud. Because if I hear it out loud, then I know if it sounds right.
Yeah.
And I'm reading it out loud, and sometimes I'll read it out loud and I'll be like, this sounds so bullshit. Like, do I really need to hedge all this stuff? And so I'll cut it out and put out the video. Sure enough,
then people
9,000 comments. I'm like, oh my God, please just shut up, go away. Like, I know, but did we need to talk about that here in this context?
It's an unhealthy thing, and you end up, it kind of screws up your thought process because you're constantly, instead of even thinking about the thing that you're thinking about people's reaction to the thing.
Yep. But this is, again, the bad side of the good side we talked about, which I'm very confident in my arguments. If I get a discussion in real life, people don't stand a chance. Like, I can argue the benefits of great cities, and nobody could possibly stand a chance in that conversation.
You need to be able to follow up. Okay, but...
Yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, so I've seen that 43,000 times, mister. I know exactly what to say to that objection.
Exactly.
But yeah, the other problem is you are constantly thinking this way, and it is so exhausting.
Yeah.
But on the Reddit thing, I also find that this is a job that you just can't escape, because I don't watch transit content anymore. I can't, because again, it feels like that's my job. I can't also do that in my spare time. So I watch totally separate stuff. And it is funny, sometimes I get people like, hey, can you give me the channels you recommend? What do you watch? And I'm like, do you really want to watch like engineering and physics videos and modular synthesizers? And like, is that really what you're interested in getting? Because that's what I watch. But so I will find though, like social media is ruined for me, like forever. I can't use social media anymore, partially because it's a job, but also because guaranteed I'll be reading a subreddit, I'll be reading a Mastodon thread, and somebody will bring up urbanism and they will bring up me. And I'm like, do I have to read about myself? Like, I'm just trying to do this in my spare time. I don't want to hear about me, good or bad. I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, it is remarkable. We have I'm not sure. I have a tool. I'm sure you have a tool that notifies you when you come up in certain places.
Oh, I had to turn that off. I did for a while.
It's
I had
unhealthy,
to turn it off.
But
yeah.
But you do see this stuff. And I mean, I think that's a challenging part of YouTube for sure, is just that kind of awareness and the presence that you have and the fact that you're kind of always on, and that's difficult. And I think what I was going to say before, and it kind of, coattails into this stuff quite nicely, is that you deal with this enormous stream of communication from people.
Yeah.
Like emails ruined too, because it's like, oh my God, every email I have, somehow someone has it and they're emailing me constantly. I get a ridiculous amount of email. And the most frustrating thing is people first of all, they send emails full of typos and they want things. They're like, can you tell me what to do in my city? And it's like, I'm not your consultant,
I am now basically impossible to get a hold of. And it's because of exactly stuff like that. Because I literally used to get people to be like, hey, I'm going to be in Amsterdam next week. What should I see while I'm there? I'm like, am I your fucking travel agent? Like, are you kidding me? I have like 1,000 emails today. But it's also this parasocial relationship, right? They think of it like, I have a friend in Amsterdam, and you would ask your friend this and you would expect it. And the worst part is when you don't respond and they get angry. And they'd be like, I just sent you a perfectly reasonable question and you refuse to answer. I'm like, what is wrong with you people?
This is a real thing.
So I had to make myself impossible to contact.
And then it's so frustrating because then you're like the one person you're like, please, I would like to talk to you.
I know, right? Because I do want to talk to people.
Yeah.
I actually got an email just the other day. I was complaining to my wife. She's like, I don't want to hear about it. But it was like this email. The first part of the email was like, I've been trying to contact you for weeks. It's so difficult to find your email address. I even went to Strong Towns and I went to this person, I went to this person, and finally got your email. And then they asked me a question that I have on my contact page, contact.notjustbikes.com. Like, it's there, right at the top. I'm like, you didn't think to look at the page that I linked to in my About section that literally answers your question. Why are you trying so hard to get a hold of me to ask me this thing that you already know?
It is remarkable how people's resourcefulness can be limited to like certain verticals.
I know, right?
And it's like
very myopic, like
yeah, they were able to like go through all these hoops and they jumped over a pit full of snakes and then they finally found you and then they asked like, so do you think that Amsterdam should have blue bike lanes instead of red bike lanes? And it's just like, oh my God. You have so many of these experiences on YouTube and it is, I think it's eye-opening because to a large extent, you actually just deal with the general public. Like it is sort of like being a politician or something where you see all of the crap. You just see it and it's like, okay, some people are like this, some people are like this. You're a public figure. I think it's a good training for that stuff.
Yeah. And people have these weird ideas about YouTubers. Like there was a guy who purposefully clipped a screenshot of one of my comments out of context, like purposefully removed the context of it to make me look bad, and then posted that screenshot all over Reddit, Twitter, and stuff like that. And it was a shitstorm. This happens to me all the time. And when I confronted him about it, he said, whatever, man, you're a public figure. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm a person, like, with a family and like...
This is extremely frustrating. I've had the thing that... So this experience where you like actually reach out to someone who does something like this, what I find happens a lot of the time is when you actually get in contact, they're kind of like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think it was going to... I didn't think that slandering you on the internet was going to like have a negative impact on you.
You know, every one of these people who has done this, they're doing it for likes and they're all like 17. They really are.
The power of the internet. Yeah, it's really frustrating. I think that all of that like social interaction is very tiring, but it is also just making videos. Like, you know this well. Videos are such massive projects. For me, it was different because I think I was sort of forced to cap each video. And so it was like the video got as big as it could and then I had to release it. But it still ended up taking up basically all of my time. I was working on the weekends. I was working all the time. And it's really hard because videos, as you already mentioned earlier, there's a script writing process. There's filming. There's editing.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot harder than, say, writing code or writing a blog post or a lot of other things because it's so kind of multimodal. You're doing so many different things. And filming is nothing like writing, is nothing like editing. They're all very different skills.
They are.
That different people
and researching too is totally different too.
Exactly. YouTubers have to kind of do all of these things, but most people are not actually good at all of these things. And so it's really challenging.
But it's also a good thing that you get to do all of these different things. And like, I'm another creative person that has ADHD and I love to jump from thing to thing to thing. That's great. But that's exactly it. The positives and the negatives, they're all deeply intertwined on YouTube.
And it doesn't pay that well.
No. Well, it does and it doesn't. I've done very well on my channel, mostly because every YouTuber will talk about this. It was like 2021, 2022 when COVID was on. And boy, was the money rolling in.
True.
But people are not doing as well. Your YouTubers that you watch are not making as much money as you think they are.
No, that's my point. I mean, like, I think YouTubers, you can make a good living on YouTube, but you're going to put in way more mental effort and probably more hours than you would need to in a lot of jobs to make that amount of money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I used to be a tech executive, right? Like at startups. I wasn't, executive of Google or anything, but I was making decent money and I could do that instead of this. But I do still like doing this.
Yeah, because it is nice to know that you're actually making a difference. And I mean, that's not to say that every YouTuber is making a difference or a positive difference. But I do think that all of the urbanism content, essentially, on YouTube, it's had a huge impact. Like, it's undeniably had a huge impact. If you go to town meetings and stuff, you hear about the same concepts. You hear people clearly quoting and saying, like, using rationales and justifications that they've heard online. And I think that's a really positive thing because, if there is a curve and it's like, how urban are cities around the world? How good are they? The curve got nudged in the right direction by all of this explosion of content, right? And that's a really nice thing to be able to say. And the great thing about YouTube too is that the stuff stays on YouTube. And so it's like, as long as YouTube doesn't disappear. Don't disappear, YouTube.
Come on, YouTube.
We don't want that AdSense money to continue.
I know we have a love-hate relationship with the YouTube, but you're still way better than TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and everything else combined.
Yeah. I mean, this is why it's good that there's platforms like Nebula that have spun up to kind of provide like, safe havens so that people like Because honestly, the amount of value that's been created on YouTube is immense. But it's always, you're like, all it takes is one algorithm change to blow the whole thing up. And so,
yeah, or like some incorrect copyright claims. Like there's so many ways that
yeah.
our channels could just disappear overnight.
And honestly, it's a bit ridiculous.
That's scary. That's really stressful too.
It is scary and stressful. And frankly, it shouldn't be that way. Like, YouTube should have a better policy that once someone is at a certain size,
there's a high bar to get rid of it. Yeah,
for sure. But like, there needs to be, like, you can't really get in touch with people from YouTube very easily. It's a bit of a nightmare. It feels kind of more immature than it should. But yeah, the thing that's good at the end of the day is that the videos are up there for the long term. And so I think it's exhausting as a creator because you go through a process. Like for me, I think I had earlier videos and over time, my opinions changed, my videos changed. And it's very tiring. You don't want to sort of relitigate that process over, again and again. You don't want to talk about the stuff you probably don't want to talk about garbage bins, right? But the good thing about YouTube is that someone can actually enter at the beginning and kind of go through the process at an accelerated rate if they want and kind of catch up with where you are now and the stuff. Because I think it's the case for most YouTubers that your videos also build on your earlier videos. You might reference them. You talk about the ways your opinions changed, kind of more sophistication. And I think that that's there's like a meta narrative to your entire channel that evolves over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't go back and watch my old videos. They're always so cringy to me. But yeah, absolutely. And it used to be like I had the catchphrase of, I'll talk about that in a future video. And now I almost as often say, well, now I hardly ever say that. Now what I typically say is, and I've talked about that before in this video, which helps a lot with that whole like having to cover everything. You can briefly mention it, mention the video, and then move on with the rest of it.
100%.
And that really does help. And of course, I mean, as you said, the good part is the platform and being able to talk about these things because these good cities are obviously important to me. That's not my background. That's not, I'm not an urban planner or anything, but that's something that's been important to me for many years. And I love that I can make a video like my trams video because I genuinely think that trams make cities better. And I've had that opinion for 20 years, 15 years, something like that. I don't know, but a long time. And maybe I've posted on Reddit about it or something, but nobody gives a shit. But now with this platform, I can put all those thoughts, crystallize them, put video of them, put my evidence of this and put it out there. And 1 million people are going to see it.
And it's economically rational too.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's not to say that you're in it to make money, but I don't think people understand that, like, to craft a coherent argument, to make a good video, it is an expensive process, not necessarily in terms of money, but in terms of time. Like, this stuff takes a ton of time, hundreds of hours.
Sometimes it is in terms of money. I sometimes get people being so dismissive about, why do you have a sponsor? Your videos are so cheap. Like, it's just a bunch of videos that you take with your phone. And I think about, like, for example, my self-driving cars video, which was an insane project. Like, the only reason I could take that on is because I make money with YouTube and I expected that video to do well, and it did. But, like, when I think about what I did for that video, like, it was at least 2 years in the making, possibly more. But 2 years ago, I asked a guy in North Carolina to drive to this city in the middle of nowhere to film their downtown that was dead because they ran a highway through it. I heard about this city from a Strong Towns article. I paid a guy that I found on Craigslist. And you think about the amount of time that takes to find a person who's reliable, find someone who's willing to do it in the location.
You are crazy about this, but yes, it is crazy.
And then this guy went out and did this and filmed it for me. And I paid him. I paid him a fair amount of money for this. It's a professional videographer and it's a full day driving and everything like that. For what? So that I could use that clip. I have used it in other videos, but like that was a segment that I didn't even need to include. I could have put a street view video of it. I paid somebody in Phoenix to go to an intersection where the first person was killed by a self-driving car. I paid him also to drive around in a bunch of Waymos. I paid a guy in San Francisco to do the same. And I paid a guy in New York City to go and film a pedestrian bridge. All of this took research, knowing about it, finding the person, hiring them. The time and money that's involved in that is actually legitimately insane. And I started building a budget for that video of how much I spent, and I stopped because I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Like, I probably spent 10,000 euros. Like, I got 3D artists to make a bunch of stuff too. Like, it's so dumb to spend that much money, but I wanted to make that video.
And it's good. I mean, it's good for the world. But that's the thing about YouTube is that there was no way that this could have rationally happened before YouTube.
Yeah. But how could I have done that before YouTube existed, or if YouTube didn't exist? There's no way I could have done that. I wouldn't have had the money that YouTube brings to pay for it. I wouldn't have had the platform that YouTube brings to do it. No TV company would let me make that video. I couldn't go to TV Ontario and say, I want to make this. They'd be like, get lost.
It's created a justification for a lot of things that didn't get any coverage in traditional media. And I think that is a legitimately wow, a technology story of something that actually was really positive, because it's made this kind of nascent industry of talking about cities and urbanism online explode. And honestly, I think, you mentioned that you're not an urban planner. And I mean, I think that it's very important, you give that caveat. But I think that it's such an important thing that you don't need to be. You're not, but you just need to be thoughtful, basically. And if you're well-researched, you can give opinions. You can look at a thing, and if it doesn't work for you as a person, then it doesn't matter if an urban planner says it's good. It doesn't work. It's not good.
Yeah.
I think a big problem that urbanism had decades ago is that the urban planners at the time were highways are the thing now. And if there had been a more kind of human-centric approach, they would have gone, well, it's terrible for people's health. It's going to destroy whole neighborhoods. It's going to create these barriers in cities that create these divisions. But instead, it was this kind of purely technocratic, we've decided that this is the thing that we need now, and we're going to just do it. And so I think that it actually adds a really useful balance of a person living in a city, how do they experience it? And it helps, I think, even urban planners reconnect with the fact that you are building a thing for actual people, not just
the human beings are going to live in. Yeah. And it has such an unbelievable impact on your life. The way your city's designed. The one person that I always bring up when people are like, you're not an urban planner, I'm like, yeah, well, Jane Jacobs wasn't an urban planner either. Not that I'm Jane Jacobs, but it's the same idea, right? Jane Jacobs was the person who managed to push back against Robert Moses, who had everybody behind him. He had all the power. He had all the money. He had the GM and all the automobile industry behind him, and she was able to push back against that.
And he was if you haven't read The Power Broker, read The Power Broker. But he was not a dumb guy. He was extremely connected. Oh, yeah. He was Yale educated. He was an Oxford.
Super smart guy. I mean,
conniving.
Evil and racist as hell.
Yeah.
But And, if you were to say to Jane Jacobs, oh, you're not an urban planner, get out of here. Come on. That is a load of bullshit. And you're right. You don't have to be an urban planner. I think in order to talk about this intelligently, you do have to travel and live in different cities. Preferably different countries. I know that's a little bit snobbish to say, but I think in order to really understand it, you do have to do that. But yeah, it's mostly just that you have to experience it. I don't think you can intelligently talk about public transit unless you've ridden public transit for a while. And not just to go out and do things for fun. Same with cycling. It's not just going out on leisure rides. It's about going to work every day, no matter what the weather's like, no matter what's going on. Yeah, doing it with kids. Having to take that bus every single day and dealing with the fact that it comes 15 minutes late and two of them arrive at the same time, you have to have experienced all of that. And all of this is about experience at the end of the day. That is the most important thing.
And so it's funny because it's YouTube, not only is it its own whole career, but depending on what topic you're covering, there's all this other stuff that kind of comes with it, right? And so I think it is actually kind of hard to get into because I see a lot of people who, and this is not to try to, I'm happy that more people are, dipping their toes. But there are people clearly who kind of have come at it in the reverse direction where they're trying to start a YouTube channel and they're urbanism seems cool, but they clearly haven't taken the time to actually, you can live in a city, you can walk down the same street every day and never actually go, actually look around and see what's around you and pay attention. That's possible. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that
some people just want to live their life.
This is requisite though for wanting to talk about the way cities are designed is paying attention. And I think a lot of people have started to come into the space who don't necessarily, they're just looking for a thing to make content about.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when those people do come into the space, I will tell you from experience, one of the first things they do is try to take down the big guy to prove him wrong and to make a bunch of videos reacting or complaining about or whatever.
I had this experience, and this was one of the things that legitimately just made me miserable. When this other YouTuber, who I don't have really any opinion of, besides through their crappy actions, they literally put my name in the title. I think they might have even put me on the thumbnail of a video retroactively that didn't mention me in it at all. It was like Reese Martin is wrong about this thing, and I wasn't even mentioned in the video. And then the video got twice as many views as every other video they were making, so they did it again. And it's like, sorry, this is terrible. This is not, no, you're not doing a good thing when you do this. It's not, I don't know. The people I meet who are creators, generally speaking, are actually extremely nice and very humble and like not snobbish. And then you see stuff like that, and it definitely, that's what makes the experience less fun. Because most creators I find who've been doing it for a while are, like, you deal with all this crap in the comments, and so you understand the value of just being nice.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, I know that sometimes I'll come across as a complete dick, but it's because, somebody says something and I'll have a curt response to it. And people will be like, man, all he was asking is a simple question. And what people don't understand is that is the 700th time that I've dealt with that today. And I've dealt with 100 other things. And I don't have time. I don't have the patience. I'm just done. And this is, again, why I can't do comments. I read the comments of my Patreons, and that's about it. And I can't do it. But anyway, I am curious to talk about, just to finish off here. So what's next for you? It's not YouTube. Well, you do have a couple more videos to make, I remember you saying.
Yes. I do want to, and it's kind of hard because for a lot of videos, if it's a place I can't realistically get to, or where I've been, but I don't have footage, which is unfortunately a lot of places, because if you've traveled a lot and then you started doing YouTube, I have photos. Photos aren't very useful. I want video. So
I have that all the time. I literally was just working on a video today, a place that I've been many times, but never took any video, of course.
Especially if it's a place where you're growing up or something, where it's like you just would never even consider that. And so I want to do videos on Moscow just because it's got a famous metro. I didn't do it for years because of the whole we're invading a sovereign nation thing.
Yeah.
But I do have to make the video at some point. So there's that one. And getting footage is hard. This is another thing. People are like, oh, you use other people's footage in some of your videos. That makes it so easy. And then it's like, no, it's actually coordinating it and managing.
It is so much harder to use. Like, there was a brief moment in time where I asked fans to get video for me, and that was such a disaster for so many reasons. Like, I can't even tell you what a disaster that was. That's why I pay these people to do this for me now. I don't ask a fan to do it.
It's very hard. You reach out, and 15 people will reach out, and they all are like, I can film the same thing. And then there's another thing that you actually need, and no one can do it. And it's stuff like that. But I want to do Moscow because it's so famous as a metro system. It is legitimately very good and interesting. And it's one of those systems that it's not an English-speaking country. It's a bit hard to learn about. And so I think that's a good one. It's underground, so if you go on Google Maps, you're not going to see a lot. The other one is Beijing. I've done Shanghai, I've done Shenzhen, I've done Hong Kong. Beijing has the biggest subway system in the world now. And so it's sort of like, I got to do that one.
It's so funny. I haven't been to Beijing. I think the last time I was in Beijing I haven't been lately. I've been to Beijing a dozen times, but I think the last time I went was in 2010 or something like that. I wouldn't even know how to talk about Beijing now because it's changed so much.
Yeah. Chinese cities are really hard, to be honest. And I actually think it's one of those things that it is kind of a big gap in the urbanism sphere, right?
Yeah. So Tech Alter made a video about Shenzhen that I think everybody should watch.
I haven't watched it, but it's in my watch later.
You should watch it. So I didn't realize this, but Martin used to live there.
Yeah.
And that is so cool. I've been to Shenzhen so many times for business, but not like the Shenzhen but going to a factory in the edge of Shenzhen.
Yeah.
Those places were wild. But seeing his video of Shenzhen, it's like I've never been there. I looked at it and I'm like, I don't recognize anything. I've been to Shenzhen so many times. Not a single thing did I recognize in that video. It's all new. It's all different. It's wild. It's wild what has happened in Shenzhen.
Isn't it crazy? This is the thing. If you want to make a YouTube channel, you actually want to make high quality, urbanism style videos of Chinese cities. I'm just telling you, if you did that well, that's a 1 million subscriber channel easily.
Oh, you could talk about Chinese cities as its own channel forever.
Yeah.
And you would never run out of content. There's so much, Chongqing and
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's just wild. It's absolutely wild.
And it's way bigger than America. And it's America is big. And so I think Beijing is the other one. And then I want to do Chinese high-speed rail. I did it before, but it was a very cursory video. And I want to do a very deep video that China is so big that they have almost disconnected high-speed networks. They have a national one, but they've started building even faster lines where they have multiple lines between cities.
Yeah.
So Chengdu and Chongqing, because they're so big and so populated that they've actually filled up the first line. So now they're building like another line that's even higher
Wild.
speed.
Wild.
And it doesn't get covered in the Western media. Like, it mostly doesn't. And if it does get covered, it's really poorly covered because, to be fair, the information is hard to find and it requires a lot of research. And so that's the other one. These are the 3 videos. I'd like to make them. It's just going to require a lot of time that I don't have right now. Like, writing one of the scripts for these videos, like, the scripts are 20, 30,000 words usually. They're super long. It's edited a bunch, and then I write again and edit again and write again. The edit takes forever. You've got to think about all these visuals. You're trying to find the right visuals to show during different segments. So I would like to finish those 3 projects when I have the time and resources to do so, which hopefully is not 5 years from now. But I really want to do that. And then, yeah, besides that, I'm free floating. I don't have a job. YouTube, fortunately, continues to, there's a lot of videos up there and they're evergreen. And so, I have an income there and my wife has a job. And so that's all fine. I am being a stay-at-home dad, kind of, and that's a lot of fun. And I think underrated. Just spending time with your kids is amazing.
Yeah, more dads should do that. I did that for a couple of years. I was a stay-at-home dad, and oh my God, it's so amazing.
It's just,
it's hard.
Having kids.
It's hard
is
work.
great. It's
but
hard,
boy, is it so rewarding.
Exactly. As with so many things, it's hard, and it's hard for a reason because it's rewarding. If it wasn't, you wouldn't do it. And so that is the other thing. And then I'm writing some blogs. I have a Toronto blog, but I think it may die because I'm, same as with the transit stuff. It's just too painful to talk about.
I know.
But then I have another one that's about kind of like personal development and self-improvement. And I think that one may not die because it's actually something I'm pretty passionate about through doing YouTube. I had to work a very unconventional job. I had to learn a lot of things. And I think it changed the way I live my life, etc. There's an urbanism aspect to that I think people don't always appreciate. Like all the things you can afford if you don't have a car, things like that,
Yeah.
And so I think the kind of more inward-looking personal thing, I will do that. And then who knows, maybe I'll do another YouTube channel at some point. Maybe eventually I'll do public transit stuff again. If I move to a different place, maybe I'll talk about that and do something. I think there's something to be said for doing a global thing, but I think there's something else to be said. And I mean, I think you would probably agree that it would be cool if there was just like a YouTuber in most cities that just sort of covered that city in great depth. When a new thing opens, they go down to it, they film it, they make a video. These people exist in different jurisdictions, but having that in like every city would be kind of amazing because a lot of cities, there's a lot of stuff going on and it's just never captured. Like a lot of these Chinese cities, for example. And there's so much to learn in all of that. And there's so much interesting stuff going on. And so I think that could be an interesting thing. Like, say, move to a smaller place. Like, this is going to sound hilarious to anyone from Canada, but I muse about moving to Kitchener-Waterloo because it's like a small place.
Yeah.
But you're like, it's small enough that they could actually go on a better trajectory than like Toronto.
I need to talk about that in a video. I went to school there. And one of the things that amazes me is that when I went to university in Waterloo, I'm dating myself, but I went to university in 1995.
Old.
And London and KW were basically the same city.
Yeah, this is a great video.
Like, they were both university towns. They were both, like, full of stroads. Like, moving from one to the other was basically, slightly different layout, but they were the same city. Since then, KW has done a bunch of really good things to improve their urbanism, and London has not. And they are not the same city anymore. And I think that's interesting.
It's so fast because they were about the same size, right?
Yeah. KW was smaller. If you kind of included Cambridge in there, maybe you could get close.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. London was bigger, but, London has done nothing good. Okay, not nothing. Almost nothing good with respect to urbanism since I left in 95. And KW has done quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's actually so interesting because I think it's a lot bigger now. And you can kind of see, like, projecting forward, it'll have 1 million people. They're doing high density in all kinds of places. Some of it's not even just towers. There's some mid-rise apartments and stuff. They have some historic buildings, which you can kind of see like, oh, wow, like this has some potential. Yeah. They have some good bike infrastructure going in.
They got a tram, man.
They have a tram, of course. We can't forget to mention the tram. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I see in it, is that it's a small place. But unlike Toronto, it's earlier on its trajectory. So if you go there, and because it's also a smaller place, you could have real influence on actually pushing them in the right direction. And I would say for people who have a choice, moving to a community like that, and it doesn't even have to be a place that's as large as Kitchener-Waterloo, you could go and get some influence. And if you really care, you're going to be more motivated even than the NIMBYs. You could have a real impact. And in a smaller place, there's less NIMBYs to deal with. So you can push things in the right direction.
Well, this is what Chuck is doing in his hometown of Brainerd, Minnesota, right? Brainerd, Minnesota is 15,000 people, if I remember correctly. It's tiny. He's had a huge impact there. He's also pissed off a lot of people there too, but
my vision is, imagine Kitchener-Waterloo. It could be like Utrecht. It's actually like...
It could. Legitimately could. It would take a while, but it could.
It's not, okay, Utrecht has a tram line that has like a little branch going off. It has a huge train station. There's differences, but like Utrecht is, proximal to Amsterdam and Rotterdam. KW is proximal to Toronto. There's so many of the things that Utrecht does that if KW went in a different direction than Toronto, it could be like Utrecht in 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Imagine how amazing that would be.
I mean, it could be less if they
really
made it a priority. Yeah. Again, as going back to the beginning, all of these issues are political. They're not monetary. They're really just changing people's minds and political. That's it. They could absolutely. Like KW could be such a phenomenal little city. It really could.
And I think that's the thing that excites me because, the reality is in a place like Toronto, there's always going to be a lot of sort of dead weight, and it's going to be hard to change things because there's this whole political history. And for a place like KW, so much of it, it's actually grown so much already that there's an openness to change. And I think that having all these great universities there, having some interesting scientific institutions, it's got like a lot of good stuff going on. And like if you channel that in the right direction, could have something pretty cool. So I think that move to a small town and try to influence it to be more urbanist is something that attracts me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Anything else that you're working on that you want to mention? I will put links to all of Reese's projects, his blogs and stuff in the description.
No, it's just the blogs, the kids, and figuring out what I'm going to do next, which could be one of any number of things. The thing that's cool about urbanism is that it's a growing movement. There's no shortage of problems in cities that need to be fixed.
Yeah. Even in Amsterdam, there's tons of stuff that needs to be fixed.
Of course. And that's the thing that makes it so fun, right? Like, to give one more example, look at like Tokyo Toilet. That is like the most amazing thing. And it's amazing how many urbanist type people I talk to and they've never heard of it. And it's like every city in the world should have that. And it's like that alone could be a person's project for a long time. Just like good public washrooms with cool designs in cities.
It's so cool. If you're listening, you should Google Tokyo Toilet. It is legitimately cool.
And it's you're like,
I know, it's a toilet, man.
Right?
It's like the kind of thing Not Just Bikes would make a video about, like garbage.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think that's one of the most important things is that, like, our channels end up being pretty transportation focused, but there's so many dimensions to cities that aren't transportation that can make them amazing. And I think people should figure out what one interests them and they should try to, push us in the right direction. And I think that it's a real contribution to civilization when you do that.
Well, I think that's as good a note as any to end on, to be honest. That's great. That's absolutely correct. So, well, I mean, a new chapter, right?
Indeed.
We'll see where this goes for you.
I hope I can be on again. We've had lots of great chats on the Urbanist Agenda. So.
You're welcome to come on anytime. I know from knowing you fairly well that you get very frustrated by transit and go through these swings of where you love to talk about it, and then you want to talk about literally anything else.
Yeah, that's correct.
I get the same thing sometimes. Sometimes, boy, do I think, why did I make this my job? Do I really want to talk about another fucking bike lane project? And other times, I love it. It's back and forth, back and forth.
It's the curse of caring, right?
But anytime that you want to talk about this stuff, you are more than welcome to come on, because the whole point of this podcast is to have fun, interesting conversations. And I think you're the closest thing to a co-host. I think you've been on more of these podcasts than lots of other people.
It's an achievement.
Yes, indeed. So you're welcome anytime. It's always good to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me on. And let's see where we go next.
We should talk about Korea.
We should. Korea is such a perplexing place.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we will do that.
Next episode, maybe not next episode, like a couple down the line, we're going to talk about Korea.
Sounds good.
All right. That's all we have today for the Urbanist Agenda, but if you just can't wait to hear the next episode, I recommend you sign up to Nebula because every episode is uploaded there first. You can sign up at nebula.tv/agenda, and doing so also supports this podcast. Nebula also gives you access to all of the other creators who are on there, which is now over 150 at this point. You'll find videos and podcasts and classes, but there are also Nebula Originals, which are high-budget productions by content creators you may already know on a whole wide range of educational subjects. If you sign up with our link, that's nebula.tv/agenda, then you'll get a discount off a yearly membership. That's $20 off, bringing it down to $30 per year, which is honestly a hell of a deal for what you're getting. Thanks again for listening to the Urbanist Agenda, and maybe next time you'll be listening on Nebula, and then you won't even hear this part.